Before we get started, I want to introduce an element to this video that will help us keep things moving and keep the length of this video down a bit. This is the speculation meter. It's going to monitor the video and show with its tracking lancer just how speculative the words I'm saying are. It has 3 levels. The first is mostly factual. When the lancer is here, what is being said is generally one-for-one something being directly said by a character in Deltarune, and I'm probably including the moment it's being said in the footage for the video. There's still always the chance the character is wrong, lying, or joking when they say it, but to my best judgment, when the lancer is here, the character is speaking honestly and truthfully. The second lancer level is dot connecting. This is when I'm drawing what I believe to be a reasonable conclusion directly from the facts that we have, drawing the lines between the dots to form some picture. This is one layer of speculation down. It's speculation based on facts or really strong feelings that I think the majority of the community would agree with. The final level is basically fanfiction. This is dot connecting my dot connecting, speculation on speculation. It's 2 or more layers deep into my own bullshit that I do honestly believe in, but requires some level of suspension of disbelief to accept as part of the theorizing. When the lancer is here, you should take anything I say with a grain of salt. With that out of the way, let's go over what we know, starting with the facts we know about the hometown police force. Nothing ever happens in hometown. Crime isn't an issue, police just direct traffic and help people out of trees. They're a token government body that doesn't need to exist, except Carol doesn't need the police to do ordinary police stuff, because Carol is apparently a crime-fighting badass. In fact, it's argued that the police are more likely to get in the way and make the town less safe than they are to perform normal police duties competently. Fewer explosions, fewer mistaken crimes, fewer arrests without Undyne. Instead, Carol needs the police, specifically the police chief, to hold on to one of the 3 shelter codes. And this is a responsibility that Carol does make use of, because Alphys has seen her and Carol at the shelter together at least once, and Alphys, from all indications, is one of the newer folk to hometown, seeing as this NPC mentions they're hiring by Chris's mom, and Undyne still not knowing Alphys' name. That's what we know about the police. Undyne is the current police chief, and her primary responsibility is holding on to a code that apparently frightens even her. Next, let's go over what we know about Asgore. Asgore was removed from the force. That wording is specific and important. Asgore didn't quit in shame or feel pressured by the public. He was removed, against his will, from his post as police chief, presumably by a higher-ranking government official with the power to do so, who as far as we know is only Mayor Carol Holiday. Some event occurred involving Asgore which caused him to lose everything: his family, his job, the respect of his peers. Henceforth, referred to as the incident. This has warped Asgore's life into an obsession over the incident, seeing as his car and business are littered with evidence of his obsession, an obsession so strong Chris shows signs of trauma relating to seeing things that evoke their father's investigation. This obsession with the incident has drawn Asgore into a self-delusional state where he believes that if others, particularly Toriel's, understanding of the incident were consistent with his own, that he'd have his life, family, and job back, if only they knew that the incident was caused by him just wanting to protect everyone. Other things we know about Asgore: Rudy and Carol are supportive of Asgore, quite literally sporting the only slightly ambiguous you-know-what, and driving business directly to his Flower King shop, despite, as we established earlier, Carol necessarily having been involved in his firing. Additionally, we know Asgore comes into the church at night to pray for Chris, Asriel, Toriel, Rudy, and his flowers. Remember that list because I'll bring it back up later. In summary for Asgore, he is obsessed with the incident which ruined his life and took his job and family from him, and is desperate to set the record straight and get all of the above back with the aid of Carol and Rudy. Finally, let's look at Carol. Carol as a mayor has negative riz, but is still somehow able to run unopposed every year for hometown mayor because she works hard, has a good track record, and apparently uses her katana to ensure no crime ever happens in hometown. Carol is also an owner of one of the 3 shelter keys. Carol is obsessed with preserving things as they are and keeping them safe. Tess's bedroom has been kept just the way she left it, with no one allowed inside. Noelle's snowflakes have been bronzed and preserved on the wall despite it making her cry. And according to multiple people, she keeps everything important at home for extra security. Whatever she's been up to lately, whether that's conspiring with Chris or the Knight or really just preparing for the festival, isn't important for what comes next. Cutting that down, Carol is a badass, beloved mayor who has an obsessive need to keep things exactly as they are. Where am I going with all this? Let's use this as a starting point. The conclusion that Carol is keeping the role of police chief around primarily to safeguard one of the shelter codes. Now let's jump to the incident. Asgore made some mistake that got him removed as chief of the police force, which sent his life spiraling. If our conclusion from before is correct, we can safely assume that the incident wasn't some mistake born from crime fighting, since that isn't really the police's job in Hometown. Instead, it'd have to either be something we'd expect from a police officer unrelated to crime, like solving a missing persons case, or something specific to Hometown's police chief, which would be the shelter code. In my opinion, one of these is more likely than the other, due to what we know about Carol and Asgore's current relationship. If Asgore was removed for botching a missing persons case, it would almost certainly have to have been Dess's from a storytelling perspective, but we know Carol employs and enables Asgore, uses her power to support his business, trusts him in her home, and has involved him to some degree in her inner circle, all of which is inconsistent with the idea of Asgore having made a big enough error while trying to solve Dess's disappearance to warrant his full-on removal from the Force, a removal that in all likelihood had to come from Carol herself. On top of that, remember who Asgore has been praying for: Chris, Asriel, Toriel, Rudy, and his flowers. Notably absent is one December Holiday, who Asgore would definitely be praying for if he was feeling substantial guilt over botching her missing persons case. If instead Asgore did something he wasn't supposed to do with his shelter code, he's violated the only reason Carol keeps the police around, warranting his removal from his position while still leaving open the door for Carol trusting Asgore with personal tasks, as it would have been a betrayal of his position as police chief, not of Carol's personal trust in his handling of her missing daughter. So what could Asgore have done with a shelter key that would warrant not only his removal, but his entire life falling apart? Well, what do we know about the shelter keys? We know one is held by each of the current police chief, Mayor Holiday, and someone linked to the church or the Deltarune, whose exact identity isn't important for this discussion. And as far as we know, the only use for them is to open the hometown shelter, a task frightening enough to make even Undyne nervous and to scare the school children silly. If Asgore misused his shelter key, then what must be true? We know Asgore must have used it to open the shelter door, the only purpose we're aware of, and so we also know that all three keys must have been used. But that creates a conflict. If all three keys were used, then Carol would have had to have been present and aware of what's happening. That's inconsistent with Carol then promptly removing Asgore from the Force, seeing as she was aware of and complicit in Asgore's actions. So what's our resolution? In my opinion, what's likely is that Asgore stole Carol's shelter key, and maybe even the shelter key of the third unknown key holder. Asgore stole the keys to the shelter to open it. He did so in an attempt to protect everyone, and as a result, Carol removed him from the Force and he lost everything, an act for which Asgore doesn't personally blame her for, as he still treats her as a friend. So that's the theory as it stands. Permit me a little bit of embellishing on this tale, some fluff to fill in some of the gaps here that I think this straightforward presentation doesn't fully fill out. Carol was the hometown mayor. Just as it is now, her job was to handle exceptional crises as they occurred, and one just occurred. Her daughter Des has gone missing. She organized a search effort, an effort manifesting, among much else, in a corkboard in her home that she has preserved as is to this very day, as is her nature, seeing as the case is still unsolved. Asgore, the police chief, unsatisfied with merely acting as a figurehead chief in charge of one measly code, which, of course he'd be. He loves the idea of an old western sheriff taking the law into his own hands. It's great TV. So he begins to dig where he shouldn't, into the possibility of Des being stuck in the hometown shelter. Maybe he was spurned into doing so by Chris's account of the place. Maybe they believe she's in there too even, and that there's something dangerous inside. So Asgore comes to Carol and begs, "Please, let's just check the shelter. I know you're sure it hasn't been opened, but I have a bad feeling about the place." And Carol refuses, her controlling nature assuring herself that it would only be a waste of time and unnecessarily disrupt the preservation of the town's emergency shelter. So, with Asgore convinced that the shelter poses a threat to Des, to the whole town even, Asgore takes it upon himself to steal Carol's shelter code, and either convince a third key holder to assist him, or steal theirs as well, and open the shelter door. When he does so, inside is the brutal truth. Asgore was right. He's met with some unspeakable horror, something outlandish and unbelievable if not seen with your own eyes, something not unlike a dark world. Asgore flees. He rushes back to Carol and comes clean about stealing the codes. She's furious as he stumbles and tries to explain what he saw, but in the end he knows it's no good. They need to see it for themselves. He drags the mayor to the shelter, hollering about the danger, calling for the aid of the able-bodied in the town to confront the terror within. The 3 key holders approach the door. Unlock, 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 open. Nothing. Just an ordinary emergency shelter. The terrifying world that Asgore saw is gone. The shame and embarrassment Asgore feels is overwhelming and crippling. Even if Carol were to accept that Asgore believes what he says and that he did what he did out of the goodness of his heart, there's no way with how everything's gone down that Carol can let Asgore keep his position. But Asgore can never let it go. He knows what he saw. He saw the horrific truth, and he knows that if he doesn't put everything he has into proving what he saw was real, he'll never be able to undo the torturous pain inflicted upon him on that day. Thanks so much for watching this quote-unquote mini theory. This video was an experiment to see if I could make a condensed video under 5 minutes long that still felt complete and thorough. That experiment was a failure. But it's still significantly shorter than my first 2 videos, though even at 10 minutes there were still things I wish I could have covered in more detail. Let me know what you think. The ideas I'm scripting out right now are 100% conducive to a longer form video like the second soul possession video, so if you prefer the longer stuff, keep an eye out for those. This one was more of a side project. Fun fact, for those who've stuck it out, for the first 2 videos, only about 30% of people were still watching by the end of the video. So if you're one of those, you've got a better attention span than 70% of people, or a better tolerance for my style of content. I had a couple people asking about Discords, and I have no fucking clue how any of that works, so leave a comment if you do, I guess.